Why does it take 19 weeks to get a sale through? Today, I'm joined by Richard Donnell, who is the research director of Zoopla. Richard, why does it take 19 weeks to get a house sale from sale agreed all the way through to exchange and completion? Talk to me.
I think it's because we collect the same data from different people all the way along the process, and we simply just don't connect it all up, basically. So you're a homeowner, you put your house on the market. Some people will ask you to fill in a form with lots of information. I think a lot of people then, effectively, once the home does get sold, only then does the penny drop that they need a conveyancer or a solicitor. Then you're scrabbling around trying to find one. Then you have to pass your anti-money laundering, and all your ID checks. Then these forms start arriving you ask you a lot of questions. You're thinking, well, how do I answer all of this sort of stuff? And that's for your solicitor. And then obviously the mortgage broker turns up. So I think the real challenge is there's a lot more process, there's a lot more regulation around the mortgage, the conveyance, the raising the finance, the proving who you are. And I think consumers aren't prepared for that when they think almost the job's done when it goes sold subject to contract, basically. Um, and then we have to realise where people are taking a mortgage, the conveyancer solicitors are working for the bank on their instructions. Again, consumers don't realise this basically. And so I just think we've got a huge amount of information that needs to be collected. I'm not sure it's all as relevant as it needs to be. Some of it can be really hard to collect. And so it just jam this whole multiple collection of the same data just jams up the whole process. And more often than not, it is the conveyancer and the solicitor that kind of waits for all this information to arrive before they start the process. And they're following the lender's process. And so, and again, there's a lot of fee pressure on brokers, particularly on surveyors, on conveyancers, solicitors. So they want to get it all right, right? And then at the end of the day, all the variances and things that aren't right with the property, they want to send to the lender going, are you happy with the fact that there's these 15 things that you need to sign off on? And often that can then lead to a surveyor going out again to check for the bank. And so I think the answer for me is banks have got to take more of a role in trying to streamline this process because a lot of it is for them. And I think equally, we've got to get consumers more prepared upfront in the process to, again, if you want to move home quickly, there's these things you can do that might be a good idea that could make the process go faster. So consumer education at the front end is important too.
Almost get the solicitors involved when the house comes on the market.
I think so. And I think I do wonder whether we'll move to a world where we'll have kind of transaction ready listings where a consumer can search for property and they'll go, look, I'm just interested in properties that have got all this information. There's a solicitor involved or a conveyancer, there's the TA6 form, the searches have been done. I think the key thing with all of that, then, there's some great initiatives underway at the moment to start doing this. But it's all well and good me as the seller and my solicitor putting all this together with the agent. But will the buyer's solicitor rely on that information, or will they want to run off and collect it all again on behalf of the bank and the buyer? And sort of, do you know what I mean? And this is what's really, I think, killing us is people collecting the same information over and over again. And it really comes to the heart of will conveyancers and banks rely on information but collected by someone else passed down the line, basically.
Yeah, it's interesting you say because they're all one thing that struck out at me was because they're not earning so much, they've got to be so squeaky clean that they don't get.
Sued, PI cover, etc. And again, look, I've heard this from a few people where, even at very small loan to values where the banks don't lose anything. And again, the irony is house lenders want to lend, they're fully capitalized, they want to say yes all the time. But and actually, and again, I think that the challenge is they put a lot of pressure on their brokers, on their surveyors, on their lawyers to make sure everything, they're the people acting for the customer and the bank to make sure it's all there. But as properties are all different. It's complicated. And again, I think there's almost too much data in the world at the moment. There is so much data out there that might or might not impact property values. I think we've got to go back to really trying to simplify this on what really, really matters to the customers. Does a property really exist? Is there really a red line in land registry that you can borrow against? Then consumers, for me, care about how can I use the property? Can I park a white van out the front? What's it going to be cost me to park there? Other estates charges, other limits on what I can do with my property under leasehold and things. Then I think there's just a massive list of things that might or might not I might be worried about or not worried about. I live opposite a pub. when I visited the property, I can see there's a pub opposite. Why do I need a surveyor to tell me there's a pub nearby or whatever? So again, I think we've got to sort of try and cut through a lot of this data and information to work out what's most material to the transaction. And then effectively, what do we really need to tell consumers? Um, and again, it's trying to get all those nasty surprises up front before they put their home on the market or get it on the listing. And this is I guess, the challenge for agents. How much do I want to put all the negatives about a property on a property listing? But if they're going to find out about it anyway from their lawyer or whatever, then it doesn't have to be negative. You can put a spin on it, right? But it's all this information.
And do you think there is an issue about one side not accepting the searches from another? Is that
I think the searches is fine. I'm not uber close to it all, but I think the challenge is I think the secret to making this process go faster is to have a data collection flow and process where everyone sort of believes the data that's been collected. I think the more times we have ID, anti-money laundering, filling in forms about the property and things, the more times that's done many times over, there's a risk it conflicts.
do you think this do you think this can only be sorted out with legislation? I mean, we've got the Home Buying Selling Group, which are a government-sponsored organisation, but again, and then property market seem to be doing their own thing, the Law Society doing other things, and then there's committees, and there's almost committees for committee's sake. Does it need grabbing by the scruff of the neck and saying, right, you lot?
Potentially, I
And we've
think
even
it's
got the Law Bloody Society, excuse my French.
yeah, no, I think it potentially does. I mean, again, with a lot of water's passed under the bridge since home information packs, right? So much more data is out there, available, etc. So you would like to think that if the government did want to mandate something that you can't list a property without the following report that goes on the listing is passed to the buyer, a bit like the Scottish system, effectively, that's an option, right? And again, if you're doing the biggest financial transaction in your life, why not spend 200 quid, 300 quid to buy a report to put it up there then? But as long as everyone down the line believes the data in that report,
Yeah,
basically,
because
it's
there was even surveys, but then the banks said they wouldn't accept the survey.
well, I think, and again, you need the whole system joined together. I think, look, there's a lot of good stuff happening at the moment. There's a lot of coordination, there's a lot of industry collaboration and coordination about how can we use data. And again, I think what's really good about it is it's going all the way through from the estate agent to the brokers, all the way through to the banks. Because I do think lenders have got a big role to play here. They're the ones that come up with a big list of all the stuff that they will and won't lend against and what the conveyancer needs to do. When I chat to banks, I do say to them, look, if I were you, I'd be looking at, trying to streamline, simplify. These are often rules written many years ago. The world's moved on. And I think insurance has got a much bigger role to play. When a deal gets jammed up, a solicitor will obviously go to a PI insurance to unblock it. Again, I think we need to look at how we can ensure data quality, because the other thing about all this data and passing it around is, to your point earlier, what if it's wrong, right? How can I rely on this information? So if we can get a bundle of data going through that everyone can rely on, and there's even insurance wrap around it for the bank and for the seller or for the buyer, that's where I think we need to get to. So that you could see industry getting to that kind of data report. But again, I think the option of legislation is always there. But again, I think in terms of the government's priorities, building 1.5 million homes seems to be number one. Getting the renters' rights bill through needs number two, and then they want to probably focus on getting the economy growing. Basically, I think it's home buying and selling is sort of there or thereabouts, but it's not at the top of the list, is it?
Interesting times. Thank you for your time today.